Good day to you, everyone, and welcome to the Cultural Arts Center's Conversations and Coffee. We're together virtually by virtue of Lindsay Lasanti, our pro at technology, and Katie Fisher, our pro at getting the word out to you for our beloved Recreation and Parks Cultural Arts Center, downtown Columbus. I am Ellen O'Shaughnessy, coordinator and planner for the program. We're delighted to have as our guest today, Deb Baillienul, a painter and fiber artist whose exquisite work is currently in our Loft gallery. The show is entitled Creating Habitats. It's a wonderful show. I love it. I so enjoyed too going to the Cultural Arts Center to see it. I recommend it. Take off, sign up, and go to the Cultural Arts Center, 139 West Main Street. Deb grew up on Cape Cod and in rural Massachusetts. She went to the University of Massachusetts in Amherst and studied textiles and clothing. Growing up, Deb spent hours wandering the woods and shores of Cape Cod. Wow, by the salt marshes, collecting rocks, shells, bark, and driftwood. The love of nature continues, as we know, as Deb walks down the alleys near her house and follows the emergence of tiny habitats where birds, rabbits, deer, hawks, even mice and rats abound. Deb says, we build habitats for ourselves. Lovely houses, manicured lawns, lawns fenced to be ours. And Deb, this is such a wonderfully humorous insight. And yet nature takes back its space with weeds and wilds, creating safe hideouts for even insects and spiders. We then should celebrate our weeds and wilds. A different attitude. Wonderful. Thus, Deb is taken by nature's persistence. In the process, though, we build parks, she shares, highways, city malls, and more. It intrigues her to find spots of nature. Wild sunflowers pushing their heads through the concrete apron of a garage. And we try to remedy our impact with nature preserves, nesting sites, and national parks. But time, weather, rivers, and oceans wave their hands in the reclaiming of natural habitats. Nature does win in the end. Mother Nature is persistent, huh?
Indeed.
And nature is a part of Deb's art, especially flowing streams, oceans, and forests. Not only did Deb study textiles in Amherst, but she studied at the Quilt Surface Design Symposium in Columbus for 19 years. And for the past 12 years, Deb has painted at our Cultural Arts Center. Currently, her instructor is Brent Payne. So wonderful to have you, Deb, and take us in your charism of the persistence of nature as you express it in your art. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Ellen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful.
So how should we do this? Lindsay, why don't we start with sharing the screen? And this is, I will take you through this exhibit as a tour. You know, as my first, I will talk about these two in later, but Ellen read my artist statement, and this whole show came about because I was walking the dogs so much up and down the alleys. How about the next slide, Lindsay? And I was walking up and down the alleys and noticing how things change so rapidly in the summer, last summer, and then into the fall, and how the sunflowers grew and grew and suddenly exploded and then started to get bigger and bigger, and then they started to get eaten away, and then they were, oh, wait, they're starting to go now. The leaves are falling. I started to notice a lot of changes in the alley, and I was inspired to do this painting, which is called Gone Wild. So I also noticed in our alleys, this is Clintonville, I noticed in our alleys that people are putting up these fabulous patios with fire pits and these wonderful decks so they can socialize outside, and privacy fences so they could make it be a room. And yet, you know what? It was still changing outside the fences. It still was growing. Nature was still coming. And there were so many animals I mean, we had an abundance of deer, it seemed like, but probably they've always been there, just that we were outside more. So this piece called Gone Wild was my first inspiration piece. And, you know, you'll notice that the garage is one of those old garages, and it's kind of, it doesn't look like it's used. It's got morning glories growing up it. So, you know, this is the way it is there. The fences are broken down, and gradually the neighborhood is changing. So next slide. So all of this exhibit is about the places I live or the places I've been. So this, as Ellen mentioned, is the other side of me, which is New England and Cape Cod. This little guy is a lesser yellowlegs, and we actually snuck away last summer to Sandwich on Cape Cod. And I probably had 25 pictures of birds. When I paint, I tend to paint from photos, but it's many photos. So this one probably was mostly from one photo, but I had other photos as references too, to make sure I got the background right and the color of the reflecting water, and, you know, even the stick in the front. Can we go to the next one? So this whole preserve where we were, which is right near our house, was a marsh in Sandwich, which used to have a mill on it long ago. And the mill had, of course, changed the flow of the water, and the marsh was dirty, and the marsh was, nothing really lived in it. They sort of survived in it. So about 5 or 7 years ago, the city decided that and it's a town, little town, decided that they would redo the marsh. So they dredged it. They created places that were clean for oyster beds. They created a large boardwalk with a bridge over part of it, so you could connect from this bit of land where we were to the city, or to this town at the other end. And they created a nesting area, and this was for the piping plovers and the sanderlings and some of the other birds. There are a lot of plovers, a lot of various sandpipers and different kinds. So this is a fiber piece. This is my other kind of work. You'll notice that the first one was the painting and was fairly precise. My fiber pieces tend to be fairly abstract and not quite as representational. This one is a little bit. There is a lot of stitching in this. The base piece of fiber is the green and blue. That's one piece. And then added are cheesecloth dyed in different colors, stitched down. A lot of hand stitching on this with embroidered French knots and a few little bits of bead to kind of represent dew on the things.
Oh, so beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Let's see, on the next slide. This was another trip. This was 2 years ago when we were traveling a little bit further. We were up in Maine. This is at Acadia Park. I can't quite bring the point. It's one of the little bays in Acadia Park. Had a beautiful art gallery, fabulous, expensive art gallery, great, huge thing. And across the street was this little nature preserve garden and historical building, a little tiny building, probably built in the 1700s, which is what we are in, looking out at the pond. Well, this was, again, another mill pond. And, you know, all the places we put mill ponds in this world, that changes the environment. And yet then we leave the mills, and what is left are the structure of the pond, but nature moves in and re-inhabits. The beavers come in, or the, you know, the snails or the snakes or whatever, and they rearrange the land. The muskrats are great for rearranging land. So this is this is called Outside In, and it is the inside of the house looking out on the pond. And I have to think that that house was built there to bring nature in. So hence the name Outside In.
Well, the perspective of that must have been challenging.
Well, it is. And also challenging is what wall you hang it on, because you hang it and you say, wait a minute, is it straight? No, it's not. Oh, yeah, yes, it is. So it's one of those things that you kind of, you go by the sides and it's straight. You don't go by the top and the bottom because it's angled and you can't really tell. Yeah. So, yeah. So
you paint the scene and then you paint the window?
No, I actually drew the whole thing. And I think because I'm comfortable painting nature and trees and rocks, I probably painted the inside pretty much a base of it anyway first. And then I started putting in the structure of the window. You'll see as I go on, I can do structure. It's not my first go-to. So it's a challenge. And how do you get the sashings of the window right? How do you get the shadows right? How do you get the messy glazing that's on the outside of the window? What do you do, or the inside? What do you do with that? You know, everything adds a little bit of a detail. So that was more fun to do. Once I figured it out, it was much more fun to do. But it was a challenge to figure out where are these lines going. And then I went back to finish up the nature part, so that what was reflecting through was what I wanted.
Oh, thanks.
So, thank you. Next slide. So this, another fiber piece. This is an inspiration from both Cape Cod, Nauset Marsh, the marsh near the house we had in Chatham on Cape Cod, and up on Lake Erie. We go on Mother's Day weekend, which I'll tell you about later. There's to McGee Marsh up there to watch the birds migrate. And all of it relates because there's a heron. Well, there's herons in all of these places. You know, there's all sorts of leaves and birds and grasses and all this. So this piece is made mainly out of repurposed fabrics. The big leafed one was a big shirt. The upper right corner, that's a silk that had a fleck on it. The middle where the heron's head is, that was a pleated shirt. And I tend to go into thrift stores and look at they call them silk and silk-like blouses, and find interesting fabrics. And I may dye them, or I may just leave them the way they are. The other pieces are samples of upholstery fabric in there that you're looking at right now. There's a little bit of silk. I think there's one piece of silk I picked up in Ireland, that gray piece. Yeah, and it's bound in silk. Also on this, you'll notice at the bottom, there's kind of a notch. I tend not to always make things square, you know, and perfectly, you know, framed. I tend to go with what I feel like the shape calls for. Because in nature, you're not framed. You fall outside of the box. So a lot of my, and that's one of the challenges for me in painting, is there's a clear edge where you end. But I really like in my fiber pieces for things to fall off the edge, because the world doesn't end at the frame. So, you know, it goes on beyond it.
How did you make those leaves?
The leaves are on the shirt. They're printed on the shirt.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's one of the shirts, the recycled shirt. So yeah, that I think I cut out at the bottom right, left rather. I cut those leaves out and put them on top. I believe, yeah, just to fill it out the way I wanted it. I use the, again, the French knots, those little red dots. You can't see them real clearly, but they go up through there, and then they're up on the right-hand side on those leaves. There's a bunch of dots in there too, to bring the eye around. All of these little bits are done to make your eye move around the piece. And then the heron's head has, some red on it, as do the wings, just to bring you up there and really kind of point this big bird out. So.
Oh, your sense of arranging is exquisite.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
So
do you spend a lot of time at the sewing machine?
I'd say that again.
Do you spend a lot of time at the sewing machine?
Yes and no. I spend some time at a sewing machine's a tool. So, it's there when I need it, I use it. So I started sewing in 7th grade, and I was in home ec, and I made the gathered skirt with the waistband and the zipper. And that's kind of where I start. And I can remember that blue paisley print cotton that would have been 62, I think, 1962. And I remember that skirt still and doing it. And we had a cleaning lady who came on Wednesdays, Mrs. Eagles, and she was a real treasure for me, because I would get home at 2:30 and she would be ironing until 3:30, and I would just sit and talk to her and she'd listen to me. And I love that. And the smell of steam in an iron sometimes just brings her back. But anyway, she was a sewer. She was a real sewer. She sewed clothes, and that was an inspiration for me. So she helped me in 8th grade make my costume. I was one of the wives in The King and I bought this Kelly green taffeta and made the sexiest Mandarin dress you've ever imagined for this little 8th grader. And she helped me do it, and it was really cool. So I think I got a date out of that. I'm not sure. But anyway, but she was good. And she was the one who really brought me forward into, you can make anything you want. You can make skirts, you can make shirts, you can make pants and shorts. You can even make skirts for your mother's funny shape. This is how you alter it, because my mother had a very funny shape. But anyway, yeah, so that's where sewing comes in. But back to the voices of the marsh and the wetlands. A lot of our marshes now are engineered, because otherwise they get taken over by farmlands or construction of some sort. And so, I know the wetlands down at that OSU has down on Ackerman, they engineered those wetlands.
Oh.
And were disappointed the next year when the reeds started being moved around. But they then discovered the third year that it was the muskrats were rearranging it the way it should be, the way nature wanted it, the way they needed it. And now it's a very natural habitat. So that's when I say we try our best to engineer nature, but nature jumps back.
Oh, how delightful.
Yeah, next slide. So this is Stool and Donkey. So I'm going to jump across the Atlantic to the other side, to Ireland. I had to put this guy in because clearly there are the manufactured stone walls, which I grew up with in New England. And then this wonderful donkey with his hydrangeas. Right there. And we had blue hydrangeas in Cape Cod. So.
Gorgeous.
Yeah. Next one. So this is an interesting piece. Moving on. This belongs to my son. I have to say that because he said, "Mom, put on it that it's from the collection of Alex Balliol." And I said, "Okay." So I did. Anyway, I gave this to him. This is from Scituate, Massachusetts. And the harbor present day is right on the ocean. This is an inlet in the ocean, and it was the old harbor from 16 and 1700s. And, it was maintained all along. The harbor is way off picture down the left, the old harbor. So the new harbor, or the old harbor and what's left of it and these docks are the broken pieces of wood in there. So here, clearly we built a harbor and nature took over and it's gone now. In fact, they moved it. But then we went in again and decided to build this boardwalk so people could go watch the birds. So, you know, a few hurricanes later, we'll see what this turns into as well. Situate is the South Shore, south of Boston, about 20 miles, I guess 25 miles. So right on the water.
I love the painting of the wood, that each one has a little personality. Did that take a long time to do that? You're so good to it.
No, my style of painting is fairly loose. So if it's got to be exact and tight, I paint over it. If it's got to be loose, I just let the brush do the work and I add in a little color. I don't mix a lot on the palette. I mix on the canvas. So I'll put a color on and then I'll put another color on over it and then I'll smush them together. You know, if I need a light side, I'll put a light side and I'll kind of blend it over. I was at the Cultural Arts Center this morning, and when I was done, I had paint on the tips of all my fingers because I'd blended a bunch of stuff.
Oh,
So yeah, so that's
I
kind of
was
the way that
taken
works.
by the rocks, Deb, maybe because you and I collect rocks, but the
Yes, we
light,
do.
the texture to the right bottom.
Yep.
I think that, you know, just the difference in the coloring and the angle and how you did that, that took my eye right away.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. I love rocks, as Joanne says, we both collect them. I have more rocks in my paintings than anything, probably. I love painting rocks and I love the cracks in between and all, and you'll see more rocks as we go on.
Deb, you're
what else
talking
on-
about my country now. I taught high school at Cohasset.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I know you have an accent that I recognize. Just a hint of one. And appreciate and love. So, okay, next one. Okay, so now we're moving into something more fantasy. This is called the Slithy Tove Gimbals. And you'll say, what? Unless you happen to know the poem, The Jabberwocky. So this is from Alice in Wonderland. I put this in because this is a fantasy habitat. And if you think about the poem, I'm not sure I can do it. Let's see. 'Twas brillig and the slithy tove, did gyre and gimble in the wave, all mimsy was the borough and the momrath outgrave. That to me is the setting for the Jabberwocky. The Jabberwocky being a dragon dinosaur type monster creature, perhaps, as illustrated in a lot of the poems. And here we have oversized flowers and vines and this little wormy thing on the right-hand side. Yeah, the little wormy thing. That's my slithy tove, I decided. There it is. You know, and so are the borough the flowers, are they all mimsy or are they the vines? I don't know. But I had fun doing this. I actually printed or painted all of the fibers here except for one, all the fabrics. And I did it in class at QSDS. And I did one of the pieces with Donna Lee, who's on here right now, when she taught us some jelly prints. And so anyway, so you know, this was just a fun piece. And I had these crazy fabrics. I actually had them for a year. And they were hanging on my design wall, just kind of hanging there. And I'd periodically move them around. And I had no plan. And then one day I looked at them and I thought, oh, you know, I could put purple with them. So that dark, what looks like black is really mostly purple. I could put purple with these because purple is the complement of yellow. And that's kind of yellow, orange, red. Oh, we'll need a little green. So we'll put that big rectangle on the left-hand side. We'll put that with it too. So that sat around for quite a while. And then Art Quilt Alliance, which some of us present today are part of, put out the challenge, how about making a quilt inspired by a poem? And I already had these kind of placed on the wall, on the board, kind of just pinned. And I thought, if I were going to do a poem, I would do an abstract. Oh, Jabberwocky's an abstract. I'll do that. So I did I thought that'll be my inspiration. So I started putting things together. Well, the flowers, all of them are either except for the yellow one. It's actually dyed chiffon, so you can see through it. And I've cut the flower out. You can see the one in the middle up on the orange that's surrounded by purple. That, the one over on the left, further over on the left in the middle. Yeah. That one is the cutout of the flower right below it. So I used the actual flower and then I used the cutout to make another flower. It kind of went along to just use things and reuse them and replace them and add stitching onto it to make more flowers. The scale is crazy. You know, it's just, they're big wild flowers. There's a lot of contrast in this. There's contrast in value, of course, the lights and darks, but there's also contrast in color. So I've got the purple and the yellow, which are complements, opposites on the color wheel. So are the green and the red. They're opposites on the wheel. I have a very precise line on the left, but then these orange gauzy things in the middle and at the bottom, and actually there's one at the top too on the right. Those are gauze and they're only stitched on one side. They actually flap free.
Wow.
That's it, you know, so that's why it's a rough. So I've got things precise, things not precise, things rough, you know, things curvy, things straight. It's just a whole piece of contrast, and it was just really fun to do.
Oh,
So, and it also has the irregular border. You see it as a white border. There is no white border. It is the shape that you see on all the ins and outs around the edge, and the green thing that just hangs off the side.
oh.
So,
And so
but it was a lot of fun to
wonderful
do.
time doing it, right, Deb?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
Yeah, and these did I say we're painted at the Quilt Surface Design Symposium, which this year is going to be held. It wasn't last year, and it's going to be online, which is going to be really interesting. It's going to mean I'm going to have to motivate myself instead of relying on the people around me for motivation. So that'll be tricky. So let's go to the next one. So now we're back to some more representational work. This is in Birmingham, England, on our way to Cornwall, but we were in Birmingham at that point. And Granddad and his two grandsons pushing the lock shut. And this is on the canals. You have the narrow boats you see in the middle. They go through the canals to get downstream and upstream. The locks are not mechanical or not automatic. They're all hand done. Somebody has to jump out and either open or close the lock. So this boat's gone through, they're closing the lock, the water will get let out, and the next boat downstream will come through and come up again and move forward. So this was fun. This was many, many different photos. I had the photo of the boys with the man. There was another woman in there. There was a different boat. There were buildings in the background. There was a whole building down at the end, a whole series of buildings that kind of filled the sky. There were buildings on the right. And I went for the design I wanted and kind of simplified the piece. As complex as it is much simplified from what it could have been. Just to get the energy of the kids pushing that heavy thing.
you got it. You got it.
Yeah. And again, here we are. We've created canals and we've created structures to get ourselves upstream as well as downstream. And yet we still have to deal with the amount of water, the rain. We have to deal with what we've done to the land. You know, what's coming in. What are we, you know, what is nature doing here? So, okay. Next one, we're going to jump back to, I believe, Cape Cod. This is still the Atlantic Ocean, other side of the Atlantic. And I go back and forth on the Atlantic Ocean. I love the ocean. And this is Silver Shell Beach with the rocks, with the water and the action of the water on the rocks. You can't really see in here. There's a little more green in the upper right-hand corner. And it's the idea of the algae growing on the rocks, you know, again, nature taking hold and bringing life up onto the rocks, the mussels that were on the other side, the clams, the snails, you know, the little minnows. I love wading where there's minnows. They scoot by you and they, you know, they tickle your ankles. Crabs, all the different creatures that lived in amongst these rocks. Just, you know, just wonderful. Again, it's a man-made structure of a rock jetty, but nature's taken hold of it.
Gorgeous.
Yeah. So the next one moves us down into the Caribbean. I had to put one Caribbean picture in because I love the Caribbean. And this is in Belize. One World, One Love. Any of you who know reggae music, let's get together and we'll be all right. Wouldn't that be nice?
Right.
Yep. So anyway, this is my 4 musicians in front of a bar. The what do you call it? The aluminum roof, the structure there, the palm trees and all the plants growing on the sand. This is another composite picture. Actually, the bar was completely filled with stuff, and I thought, I don't want to paint all that. You'll lose the people in it. So I took out all the bar stools and the ropes and the benches and a whole bunch of stuff. And there was a big library with stairs on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side was something else. And I said, no, it needs a palm coming in. So I took a bunch of pictures and created this. And actually, I think I may have left out one musician because he was kind of poking out behind somebody, as I recall. But I love the drums. I love drumming. So that was important to me to put the drums in. I love reggae music. These guys were just fantastic. And this is free on the beach music. How can you not be happy with that? So we try when we travel to support local businesses. Food, that's easy because you go to all the local places, and we buy local crafts. If there's music, if somebody's got some CDs, we'll always buy a CD. But you can imagine yourself here in your bare feet in the sand, sitting in the sand with your coconut knocked off with a little rum and a straw, sitting there listening to good music.
And you've captured their spirit. It
Yep.
causes you to want to dance with them.
Yep. So here we go. Okay, this is one some of you have seen. This is called Woodland Ghosts. It is made of hand-dyed fabrics. I think I did several of them, not all of them. They're mostly cotton. There is silk. It's about half cotton, half silk. There's a raw silk. There's a shiny silk. You can't see that in this, but there is also burlap, a white burlap up in the right corner. And these big things hanging down, the big things are birch bark. And one of my friends in my Art Quilt Alliance gave us each a large piece of, I think it was from New England, white birch bark. And it comes curled around on itself, and it was about 12 inches long. We each got a piece. And she said, do something with it. Wow. And we looked at this very solid, inflexible, thick bark, and we all went, huh? What are we going to do with this? And we discovered that if you soak it, it becomes pliable. And also you can work your hand in and peel the back layer from the front layer. So the top left piece, if you can zoom in on that, that's the underlayer, that's the inside. And the middle piece with that big smudge on the top, that's more gray. It doesn't show it here, but it's more gray. So that's the outside. So is the lower right-hand one is the outside as well. So you could get these pieces apart, and we all, how are we going to sew it? Well, it turns out it's really easy to sew. Birch bark to me was really striking because growing up in New England, there were birch bark canoes that the natives had used early, birch bark housing. And I always wondered, how did they do that? Because that stuff is so thick. Well, I kind of learned how they did it. I could hand sew through it very easily. I could machine, and I decided I didn't want to machine once I started hand sewing. So I basically pieced the background and then placed these birch bark pieces on that and arranged it. And I thought, yeah, they kind of look like ghosts. ghosts of the old forests of the past,
Wow.
ghosts of the native peoples that used to live there.
Huh.
So yeah, so that's why I kept, and the trick was, well, are these going to decay and deteriorate, rapidly, like in a couple years? So each piece is coated on both sides with a clear matte acrylic medium, which basically, I mean, think about encasing it in plastic. That's what acrylic is. And so then I could sew through it. And if it starts to dissolve, it'll still keep its shape because it's cased in a classic. And I was most worried about those big lumpy spirals at the top because, that is decay right there happening. So I really worked in the acrylic for that.
Exquisite.
What are the silver pieces?
Okay. Oh, thank you. The silver pieces, sometimes you get an artwork and you're almost done and you look at it and you say, something needs to zing in this. What's zinging here? So I added some silver to make it zing. It is it's a fabric. It's a lame, a silver lame. And I just slid some pieces in under the cracks just to give it another layer. They're reflective. They appear white in here, but they are silver if you see it in person. And then of course the red stitching also to bring your eye in and bring it together a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you get the inspiration of the fabric. You start putting some pieces together, get inspiration of the bark, and then you have to look at it and say, does this make a composition that hangs together? So are there enough lights and darks? Are there enough contrasts? Is there enough subtlety in it? What's grabbing your attention? How does your eye move around the piece? Is it balanced when you sit back? Does it give you a resting area for your eye? Are you continually bouncing all over the place? These are the questions you ask on a painting or a quilt or a piece of ceramic or anything you're making.
Deb, can I ask you a question about, I'm looking at, when you say that, the material in the top sort of left center, that's the grays and the browns, and then also in the bottom right. Did you start, I mean, that picks up the color so much. Did you start with it or did you start with a birch bark? It just fits in. And did you have to dye it yourself? Because it fits in so perfectly to the theme and the colors of what you have.
I think I dyed it myself, but I would have, I dyed it beforehand, before I even knew about the birch bark.
Oh, okay.
I have a lot of fabric sitting behind me, behind this piece of cloth that I want to show everybody. Anyway, I think I looked at the birch bark and I thought, what do I have in my fabric stash that would work with that?
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure what it would be. And I thought, well, look at this wonderful gray.
Yeah.
And I had just finished 4 quilts that are at the Unitarian Church, one of which had a big sycamore tree in it. So I was very familiar with my grays and my textured grays. And I thought, this is a really good one. What'll go with this? Oh, I've got this wonderful dark black, which is actually a blue black. I like that with it. And it's a coarse weave. And I have this piece of raw silk. Raw silk is a very rough silk, as opposed to a fine, what you think of as a lovely silk blouse. So the raw, I like the rawness of that. The rawness of the burlap would work. And I just started pulling in pieces that either reflected the birch or, not compositionally, color-wise reflected what was going on. So I ended up with the light colors, the tan colors, the gray and the black and the birch. And that was the jumping off point. And it was later when I said, this is all fine and dandy, but I need something to bring you in. So the sparkle of the silver and the red stitching. And the hand stitching became very important because that reflected the Native American side as well. They didn't have sewing machines in the 1600s when we invaded. So
thank you.
yes,
I see community there.
Say that again.
I see a community of persons there with an
Yes.
angel to the left.
There you go. There you go. There is an angelic, there actually is an angelic wing to that. I've actually thought that too. Yeah,
Ah, beautiful, beautiful mantra.
thank you.
Mhm.
So this leads into the next two pieces, and you'll see a color as we pass in, a color similarity from the birch bark into this piece. The next two pieces, can you flip quickly to the next one as well? Okay, and then back now. So we'll go to the other one again in a minute. So these two pieces are on Lake Erie at Oak Harbor, which is, if you know where the cooling tower is between Port Clinton and Toledo, that's Oak Harbor, because the cooling tower was right behind us at the nuclear energy site. But it's about halfway between what is that, Sandusky and Toledo. So we're on the edge there, and further west of us is McGee Marsh, which is connected to the Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge, I think it's called. So they're all grouped together, and it's a very big marsh area. That whole area was marsh before farms came in, and land was filled and canals were made and water was channeled. It was all very low marshland. I'd have to get you my husband Tom to tell you the geology of it, but it had to do with the glaciers, and the big interior lake went through there, and it's basically all old lake bottom. So here we are on the edge of Lake Erie. Beyond the rocks there, just beyond the fence line, you see a very faint horizon. That is Lake Erie. And this is a house we've stayed in for the past 6 or 7 years at this place. We go on Mother's Day weekend because that is when the songbirds migrate through there heading towards Canada. They stop on that side of Lake Erie before they make the long pitch over the lake to the other side. And so, and it's always the first couple of weeks of May, and the birds are fantastic. So we started renting this particular house. And the first year we rented, I remember walking with my granddaughter at the bottom of the rocks along the edge of the lake on a little narrow sandy area, and it went all along the rocks all the way down to a little beach further on. This past year, last year, and we'll go again this year, the water is just below the edge of the rocks that you see there. It is about 8 feet, maybe 9 feet, maybe 10 feet higher than it was 7 years ago. And part of that is the way the weather has been and the rains and the water. The Great Lakes are a contained area, and they exit out through Niagara Falls and the Wellington Canal up to eventually Lake Ontario and up to St. Lawrence Seaway and out. They don't have an easy out for all this water that collects. So the lakes are filling up right now. I'm not making a statement on climate change about that because I don't know about that. That is this, will the water get out eventually and the water go back down or not? Who knows? I don't know that, but it makes it very interesting. So we had winds blowing, and they were coming from the north, hitting the rocks, splashing onto our deck and onto the windows of our kitchen. We actually had storm shutters on our window. So the next day, here's the chair sitting there alone with the reflection of the water and the shadow of the sunshine. And I looked at it and I said, yes, you're just sitting there remembering other days. And I titled it Remembering. It's Mother's Day weekend, so of course we're all thinking about our mothers who have long gone. And and so anyway, it was an interesting challenge. It again is a very structural picture. So I had to get it believable. I won't say it's right, but it's believable. I tend to be fairly loose in my painting, so to get this to be correct and believable was a big challenge for me. And I had to take a ruler out and say, okay, this goes to there, and so it can't kind of wobble. It needs to be straight. So that it was a fun challenge anyway. And the palette, I have started to use, at this point, many more neutrals. And I just really like it with a little hint of a yellowy gold, a little hint of blue, a little hint of something like burnt sienna in it or something like that. So.
Oh, we're looking through to see those gorgeous rocks again. Oh, they're beautiful.
So the next one is.
At first look, Deb, I thought it was a photograph. I think you did a really good job.
Thank you, thank you. And this again was from several photographs. Did I want the chair further over? Did I want it there? Did I want the deck dry? Did I want it wet? Did I want it reflecting? Did I want the sky behind blue? Did I want it just kind of misted over? So it was a lot of choices there.
That chair looks like it was a real challenge.
It was. It was. And if you see it in person and you are so inclined, you can follow the struts that make up the seat and the leg area and see how many go all the way through, and are the numbers the same of the beginning and the end? And I won't tell you whether it's yes or no. And what about the reflection underneath? Are those the same number? Anyway, all the things that, some things you can make do with and some things have to be right. So anyway.
I think that's how you create the soul in your painting. If it's, it has this edge of impressionism about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's ingenious how you do that.
Thank you. So this is actually 2 years ago. This one, I was saying it was last year. This one was 2 years ago. The next picture, let's see that one. This is last year. So if I were standing where that chair was and looking west, this is what I'd be looking onto in the neighbors. And one day we had this huge storm come through from behind us, from the southwest. And we knew it was coming because we'd gotten all sorts of weather alerts. 70-mile-an-hour winds. This was last Mother's Day, you might remember it. 70-mile-an-hour winds and rain. And we're sitting out there, and all of a sudden we looked over our shoulder and said, oh, there it is, here it comes. And we watched it, and it was just really fun. People get afraid of storms, but I grew up on Cape Cod, and we used to go out in the hurricanes because the hurricanes weren't as bad as they are now, and you could do that. Storms have an excitement to me. I'm not going to chase any tornadoes, but, storms have an excitement. Again, here we are, we've structured the whole line of houses down here and, created these decks and these places where we can swim and bring our boats up and everything else. And here comes the storm to reclaim the waters, basically, reclaim the shores. So this was very fun to do. And this was a larger piece. Let's see, it's a long piece. I think it's 24 by 36 or something, 48. Where are you here? Why is it when you have a list, you can never see what you want quickly? Okay, this is 18 by 36. So it's 18 high by 36 long. So it's a very, it was a different kind of a composition for me doing a long one like this. And then I quickly followed it by doing another long composition, which isn't included in here. But anyway, so we had the storm. We did get to see the birds. We got to see the turtles on the creek behind us. The muskrats zooming along in the water. There's a whole lagoon right behind us. The lake's in front, and behind us is this big lagoon with trumpeter swans and mute swans and all kinds of herons. I mean, it was just really fun.
Wow. Now, where would you be painting this? Is this where you, at the Cultural Arts Center, would you be?
Oh, yes. Yeah, most of the painting I do, except for the very last piece, and I'll tell you about that later. Most of them I do at the Cultural Arts Center because my room here is very small. It's, I don't know, 10, 12 by, I don't know, 15 or something like that. But it's also cluttered with all my stuff. So it's a very small space. I use that mainly for fiber. And I'm worried that if I get painting and fiber in the same room going at the same time, that I will get paint on things I don't want paint on, so I keep the two pretty much separate.
Yeah, which is an art in itself, huh?
But, yes. Let's say there's just the two of us living here. So periodically I take over the living room or the dining room as well. I have a dye studio down in the basement, and then upstairs in the spare bedroom, I've just moved my weaving loom. But I discovered I was really busy this winter, and I actually haven't really gotten as far along as I wanted to with that. So yeah, and Tom has his room. So, okay, so the next one. Okay, other side of the river, and the one after it, urban sprawl. These two are relate to Central Ohio, and they reflect our development here. This one is based on driving to the Cultural Arts Center down 315. We drive through Franklinton, cross the river, and there's the big skyscrapers, and then we're at the Cultural Arts Center. And when they're not tearing up the road, we go across the Main Street Bridge, but that's not going to happen for a while now. But anyway, what I always have felt driving across from 315 to the Cultural Arts Center is we go through Franklinton, and there's a budding art community there, art colony, but there's also some older houses, long-term community that lives there that's very creative and wonderful and colorful. And you look across to these skyscrapers coming up across the river, and it's just a whole different world over there. So that was the basis for this. And that's, you'll notice the top is very structured and the bottom is kind of sweeping off to the left a little. And that was purposeful. The bottom is where the creativity is. It isn't the big structured formal, but now we start seeing more and more condos and apartments going up, and I worry for it. I worry for it as a creative community. I hope it stays.
Deb, your art quilt pieces would be wonderful topics for jigsaw puzzles.
A
Really?
little challenge, wouldn't they?
Inga is a pro at those jigsaw puzzles.
Yes,
They would
I
make-
know about them. I've done a lot of them.
They would make
Okay.
great puzzles.
Well,
Next one.
geez.
This is urban sprawl. This is also Central Ohio. This came about, I was at a quilt surface design class, and and it was an independent study, and I had this wonderful African fabric, which is the top center red, magenta, the magenta, orangey, black, and I had that piece, and I had some of the black and white, and I thought, oh, they're kind of cool together. They kind of reflect, I wonder what I could do with them. And so I started making some stripes of fabric, just stitched together stripes. And then I thought, oh, I better add some solid black. So I did. And I thought, now, what am I going to do with all of this? And they're kind of hanging on my wall, just, all these strips hanging down. And I turned some and I moved some, and I thought, oh, okay. Yeah, these could go together. It needs some black. Let's see, I'll put the diagonal black through the middle. And so I did that. And then the symposium ended, and I was no further along than that. That piece sat on the corner on a wall for about not quite a year. And I was coming up to the next symposium, and I thought, shoot, I never really did address that piece. I didn't know what to do with it. What am I going to do? At the same time, good old Art Quilt Alliance said, here's some plastic construction fence. What can you do with it? So that is the cut apart orange stripy thing through there that you see. That's cut apart construction fence. And so I took the piece and I hung it on the wall with the fabric. Then I thought, well, we've just driven up to High Banks Park. And this was the year that they were changing over the 270 and 315 and 23 area. And we got to a point in the road where we couldn't see where the road was. Where do we drive to? We're at the stoplight. We want to go north. Where is it? And suddenly a car ahead of us led the way. And we said, oh, there it is over there. We literally could not see where were we supposed to drive. And, all of a sudden I'm at home. I'm looking at this fabric. I'm thinking about the orange barrels up on 23. And I've got this construction fence. And I said, oh, I could put this all together, kind of like that intersection. So this became urban sprawl. I added in the green, I cut the fence up, and just kind of started pulling it together. Some of it is more structured and even, like the neighborhoods on the lower left corner. Some of it is more kind of random as you get up north into the more open farming areas.
Hmm.
You know, and there's that division of that black line. And at some point, somebody said to me, you need something to move the eye around. And I'm thinking, oh my God, the eye's moving around. So yeah, you need to focus it more. So the little white squares got placed in with surrounded by the black, sort of as the last bit that really pulled the composition together. It gave it more places to go in this great chaos.
Oh, it's a wonderful work of art.
Yeah. So that brings us to the last piece. That would be the Olentangy River. And this is the one painting I did do at home. I was at the Cultural Arts Center painting in early November, and it shut down, and it did not open up until February. And so during those months, I worked on this piece. This is a big piece. This is 30 inches by 40 inches, and it's the biggest painting I've done. And here I am in this little room, unable to step back far enough to figure out what I'm doing. Denise, this is the river down below our house at that ravine, and she and I have walked there before. And I've added in a tree, that sycamore tree to the front, and brought it down. I mentioned before I love sycamores. That's one of them. Again, this river, we had managed to dam up at Fifth Avenue. There's a lot of low head dams all the way along. There's a reservoir up behind that's all dammed up. And yet now it has that natural look. Some of those dams have been removed, and there's evidence of beaver chewing of wood on one side. You see muskrats, you see deer, foxes, owls, you know, everything around there. Fish, crawdads, turtles, everything, frogs, you name it. And this was quite fun to do. And so I finished it up really just before this show was hung in when did we hang it? A few weeks ago anyway, in the beginning of March. And so, you know, it's a place I love because I love to walk the dogs, go down there, walk my granddaughter down there. You know, Denise and I've walked down there. It's just a lovely place to go. And it's nature in the middle of the city. You know, here it is. It's like nobody lives anywhere. Oh, there's mansions all along on each side, but you can't see them from there. You know, it's lovely.
Oh, Deb, thank you. Deb Baillienul, our artist for today. You took us to a world that you've created for us. It was beautiful. And we love how you say, Mother Earth, nature is persistent. It's going to survive.
She wins out in the end.
Yes. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. And thank you to Lindsay. I don't see where you are, but thank you to Lindsay too. There you are, for all your help.
Yes. In 2 weeks, April 1st, we're going to host Maureen Clark, who's an acrylic artist whose art is celebrated in the main gallery show, Ekphrastic Fantastic. And so I also visited this show, and it is fantastic.
Thanks for everybody for coming. I've got my whole support group here. I love it.
Yeah.
So,
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.